Hi guys, good day. Our subject for today is 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world. This is the first lesson or first topic under the quarter one of this subject. Before I will proceed in revealing our topic for this morning, I will first read the content standard. The learner will be able to understand and appreciate the elements and context of 21st century Philippine literature from all the regions. Performance standard. The learner will be able to demonstrate understanding and appreciation of 21st century Philippine literature from the regions through, first, a written close analysis and critical interpretation of a literary text in terms of forms and themes, with a description of its context, derived from research and, secondly, an adaptation of a text into other creative forms using multimedia. Our Day 1 learning competency is to be able for the students to identify the geographic, linguistic, and ethnic dimensions of Philippine literary history from pre-colonial up to the contemporary period. And now, I know guys that you are all excited in knowing what is our main lesson for today. And our lesson is various dimensions of Philippine literary history from pre-colonial up to contemporary period. And the objectives of these lessons are, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the characteristics of pre-colonial literature of the Philippines and to analyze some literary works. For our preliminary activity, in order for me as your teacher to evaluate your background knowledge about literary works, Philippine literary works, I would like you to answer this activity entitled Find Me. This is actually a word hunt that I have crafted, and the direction says find and circle 10 terms or words which are related to literature. For this activity, I will be giving you at least 10 minutes to do it. Now, are you ready guys to acquire knowledge? I hope so. So our lesson is about Philippine literature. And before we will be able to discuss what are the various elements, types of Philippine literature, let us first define what is literature. The word literature comes from the Latin word literatura, which means writing formed with letters. So we all know that literature, it can be in the form of oral form of an oral or talks, but it can also be in the form of writing, which is very much common up to this contemporary period. So secondly, it refers to the works with imagination and creative writing skills, and it connects individuals with the real truths and ideas in the society. Did you know that different literature, this becomes a witness or a testimony of what really happened before. Sometimes it becomes also proof of, or evidence of an existence of an object or a certain artifact, a fossil, or let's say an existence of an event or an existence of a person, if that person really existed or not in our history. So those are some of the proofs or evidences that a person up to this day can be able to use to validate or verify information. Just like, for example, the works of Antonio Pigafetta, who is one of the Spanish mestizo who was with Ferdinand Magellan during their navigation through the Philippines, or before. The name of our country is not yet Philippines, but it's Las Islas Filipinas, to get spices. So along with their journey, Antonio Pigafetta, in his notebook or diary, personal journal, he wrote everything that happened every day. So when the historians or the archaeologists retrieve those written works or the personal journal of Antonio Pigafetta, they have verified what really happened during all throughout the journey of Ferdinand Magellan with the 5 ships, right? Because there are 5 ships that they brought throughout their navigation to look for, to verify or to prove really if the world is really round or spherical or flat. So that is how helpful literatures or written works of people are. Next, it is all about writings in prose or verse, especially writings having excellence of form or expression and expressing ideas of permanent or universal interest, or an example of such writings. This is actually a definition coming from Merriam-Webster dictionary, because as we all know, literature is not only defined by the written works, but it can also be through the word of mouth, just like, for example, our riddles or kasabihan. This was actually verified to be existed by word of mouth, because our ancestors, matatanda noon, it was being passed by generation to generation until now. It serves as guide of Filipinos in their daily living. Next, why literature is important. Of course, after defining a concept, it is also important for us to know how important a certain object, a certain concept is. So the importance of a literature is, first, it expands our minds. Why? Because it helps us to realize the wide world outside. With this, we learn, we become curious, and we ask questions. So as they say, philosopher says that what matters is not the answer, but it's your ability to ask questions and to never get tired of asking questions, because from these questions, we could be able to generate different ideas. We can be able to become more intelligent and wiser in life. And as I have said before, by means of literature, we could be able to know what happened before, what is the connection of an event from a connection of what is happening from today, and it can also be a guide of many people, especially the government, in maybe constructing a good framework or project in the future. So that is how important written works of people that is being passed through from generation to generation. Secondly, building critical thinking. Of course, why is it important for us to build critical thinking? Because now that we are in the 21st century of learning, wherein it does not only require teachers to become innovative digitally, to become creative, to become more communicative and open, to become more globally competitive. Those traits must also be acquired not only by teachers but also by learners. So if we have 21st century teachers, we should also have 21st century learners. So gone are the days wherein memorizing or rote learning is just a content type of learning. So at this point in time, the educational system wants to enhance a curriculum that could help students in enhancing or improving their critical thinking skills. And what are critical thinking skills? You will know that a student or a person has a great ability of critical thinking if he or she has an ability to do the higher order thinking skills, which includes the ability to analyze, to evaluate things, and of course, to synthesize, or in simpler terms, to create things on her own, coming from some ideas and linking it together. Okay. So, literary works can also help us to be a critical thinker. Not only those generic subjects like mathematics and science, which includes numbers and scientific processes, but more so also with the literary works that being passed down the generation to generation. Thirdly, a leap into the past. Did you know that history and literature are always interconnected with each other? That a history can be proved, further proved by means of literature. That's why, for example, the pre-colonial period, when you say pre, before we are being colonized by our different nationalities, just like the Spaniards, the American people, and Japanese people, you will have a critical or comparative analysis that the life of Filipino natives before we are being colonized are much more free than from the time that we are being colonized. Why? Because pre-colonial period, Filipino natives before governed our own society, in the sense that in every barrio or barangay, there's what you call a datu, who is a very powerful person to lead his fellow fellow people in his own tribe. So what is very interesting about datu is that a datu has a similar function with what we call the punong barangay in our local government unit. Why? Because they can exercise functions of an executive, of a legislative, and of course judiciary in making decisions with the help, of course, of the county of elders. Because during the past, the wisdom or advice of an elders is very much important. Why? Because they believe that Filipinos believe that elders have the greatest and the best experience in life. That's why, in order to guide the younger generation, with the people or the leaders before, the datus or the members of Mahardika needs to get some piece of advice from the elders. Next is appreciation for other cultures. Why? Because literature can help us understand and experience further, to appreciate cultures and beliefs. That is very true, class. Why? Because by means of literature, it opens up our eyes, our minds, in a very colorful and a very blended culture, rich culture of the Philippines. That when you will read, just like for example, sociology books, history books, you'll be able to determine that the culture and traditions of Philippines is a mixture of all races. That it does not really come from a single tradition or practices that our ninunos or our ancestors, the Filipino natives, are practicing before. But it came from a very rich blend culture. Why? Because because of the um, colonization, aside from the colonization, from the time before that there been Negritos, Indonesians, and Malayans who went to our country to help us improve the living before. Just like for example, the ability to hunt, we we um, we actually got it from the ideas of our etas, or the other terms for etas or negritos or balugas. So they are very good in hunting. They also have the ability to call the attention of birds if they want to hunt it as their prey. They have this certain song that I forgot the term. And then for Indones, they taught Filipinos the ability to create a structured home by means of rocks. And then of course, the Malayans, they taught Filipinos on how to make a simple farming and of course, simple ability to fish in the sea or in the rivers. So, it's a mixture of everything, including also the tattoos that we have. Just like, for example, until now, our kababayans in Tiboli tribe, and Bajau tribe, they have these tattoos, and they are all being adopted by Indonesian culture. So, it's a mixture of everything. Or just like, for example, our love for fiestas, magarbong or extravagant events, just like kasalan, binyagan, fiestas, they were all adopted from the culture of the Spaniards. Our being religious with the Roman Catholic faith or religion. That is the most important contribution of the Spaniards that they have brought here in our country. That's why 70 to 80% of Filipinos are Roman Catholics. And then, from the part of Americans, until now, we idolize Americans when it comes to their way of living, well, merely with the fashion, with the different trends, with the gadgets that they have, the simple products, the foods that they have. We all love to have American products. That's why sometimes we tend to forget to support our local products. So that is where the idea or the social terms ethnocentrism versus xenocentrism would come in. Okay. Next is to better writing skills. Of course, when you're a lover of reading different types of literature, be it be historical based, may it be a modern type of literature, then by means of reading you could be able to generate different ideas. And from generating ideas, you'll become more learned and more able person. That's why it is very important that a young person or a young learner starting from a very young age, you will train them already on reading, because from that phase they could be able to enhance after reading is their ability of writing. It is always interconnected with each other. Writing and reading and writing. That's why it is very much important for us to build the foundation, and that is to read. Now, let's move in with the historical phase of our lesson. From here, pre-colonial period, we will discover what are the various types, examples of the different literary works that arose in our country before we are being colonized by different nationalities. First, it includes all literature produced before Spanish colonization, just like chants, proverbs, songs, and folk narratives. These were all passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. And I have already discussed it or said it a while ago. So at least, we Filipinos have already learned that there are types of literary works that originally came from us. Right? It's not only because it was being adopted by the Filipino people before from coming from the different nationalities or colonizers that colonized us. So at least we have determined that, or we have learned that we have these original types of literary works, not just written works but also oral works, literary works. Local Filipino literature before, pre-colonial, is very filled of lessons and ideas about life, its blessings and its consequences. So maybe the great elders, the ancestors, learned of doing this type of literature so that even though from the point that they're not already existing here in this world, they could pass down their beliefs in life. They could be able to teach the students by means of reading their works that they have exerted so much effort in doing it, so that Filipinos, especially the young generation, could be guided of their decisions in life, or could have an immediate idea on what life is all about. How can a person be of so much blessings, and how and what is the consequence of all the actions that each person is doing. Okay, next, it contains ideas from birth to grave. So did you know that we have different literary works from the time of the birth of the person, and there is also what they call an elegy, or a death literature, or a song about death. Next is the oral characteristic of pre-colonial literature, which gives the possibility of many alterations. Next, in the Philippine context, no matter how it may be considered as altered, pre-colonial literature is still revered to by many Filipinos. So they would say that some of the parts of this local Filipino literatures that we have are already being altered, some are being changed, but still, it was being studied and revered by many Filipinos. And we still practice it up to now, right? Especially the riddles, bugtong, like that, kawikaan, or salawikain, kasabihan ng mga matatanda. We all practice it up to now. And lastly, the sources are usually the local native town talk. So the sources, or the proponents or the writers of these pre-colonial literary works are actually our ancestors themselves. Okay, at this space, we have seen here three forms of literature. First are the folk speeches, folk narratives, and the folk songs. Let's start with the folk speeches. A riddle. A riddle is a puzzle in which an object to be guessed is described in terms of another unrelated object. It relies in talinghaga, or in English, we call it metaphor. So other terms for riddle in other dialects, like for example in Cebuano, they call riddle as tigno. In Tagalog, we call it bugtong. Ilocano, burburtia. In Ilonggo, paktakon. Bicolano, patutodon, and in Kapampangan, bugtong. Example of a riddle is, my sister, your sister, everyone's sister, is an example of a riddle which the answer is sugar apple. So there's a lot of riddles that we have, or bugtong. There's actually a bugtong about piña, about different things that can be seen around us. Next is proverbs or aphorisms. These are folk speeches that instill values and teach lessons. Short, pithy sayings which encapsulate and preserve communities' beliefs, norms, and code or behavior. So in other terms used, just like in Bicolano, it was being called as sasabihan. In Cebuano, panultihon or pagya. Ilonggo, humbaton or hurubaton. Ilocano, pagsasao. Kapampangan, kasebian. And in Tagalog term, it is being called as salawikain or kasabihan. So they serve as a guide in the life of many Filipinos up to now. Example of this is, ang matapat na kaibigan ay tunay na maaasahan. Or in its English translation, you will know a true friend in times of need. Other examples of salawikain that are popular are, like for example, ang hindi marunong lumingon sa kanyang pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa kanyang paroroonan. So, that particular salawikain or proverb would tell a person, no matter how successful a person is, that person should always look back on his own beginnings. That a person should always still remain his feet grounded or humble at all times. So that is what the thought or the message of that salawikain wants to convey to the people. Next, we have Tanaga. And what is Tanaga? It is a type of Filipino poem which expresses insights and lessons about life. It consists of 4 lines with 7 syllables. However, this varies depending on the rhyme schemes. Other terms used for Tanaga, for Bukidnon, it is called Basahanon. In Panay, it serves as Daraida and Daragilon. So these are some examples of the rhyme schemes being used in Tanaga. We are applying AABB. So example of this is, tumatawag sa langit, sana ay wag magalit, tadhana'y makita, malimot pagdududa. So the letters AABB are just guide for the reader to be able to observe or determine easily that the last syllables in the last part of the stanzas of the poetry are all rhyming words. So just like for example, AA, so it means to say that in the first and second stanza, the last syllable are rhyming words. While in the third and fourth stanza of the poem, the last syllable of makita and pagdududa are the same. They have the same rhymes. Or if you want to interchange it, it can also be possible. You will apply the rhyming scheme ABAB. So, pinag-interchange lang po yan. So, just like for example, sa aking buhay na to, wala nang iba. Ngunit sa pagdating mo, mundo ko ay nag-iba. So, as you can observe, they have just interchanged the places of the syllables. So, the similar or the alike syllables are the first and the third stanza and the second and the fourth stanza. Okay. Now, move on. Another folk speech is ambahan. It is actually a Mangyan word. It is a poem with 7 syllables per line. It usually tackles about human relation, social entertainment, and also a tool for teaching the young people. Example of an ambahan. This is actually a poetry also. So, mahal. The title of ambahan is mahal. Mahal na ang delata, mahal pa nga ang abrilata, minamahal kong sinta, nagmahal ka na rin ba? So, it actually tackles about human relationships, the current life, the present situation of life, and social entertainment as well. Now, let's move on to another form of literature, which is Filipino folk songs. So, these are folk lyrics that are usually chanted. These usually contain ideas and aspirations, hopes, everyday life, and expressions of love for loved ones. It is also bounded by the learnings of good morals and can be easily understood because it is straightforward and not figurative in nature. So, it was being done or crafted, these folk songs. The lyrics of this song are actually based on the daily life experiences of our ninunos or ancestors. And what is good about folk songs is that they're not using very creative technical terms. They're not using highfalutin words which cannot even be perceived by an ordinary person. It's just used as a layman's language. It's just used as a straightforward type of language. Next is lullaby. A first example of folk song rather is lullaby. These are actually songs to put children to sleep. In other terms for used in lullaby, for Tagalog we call it oyayi, Ilonggo is ili-ili, Ilocano duwaya, Kapampangan tumaila, Aita is andang, and Tagalog is hele. So these are actually songs that we sung to our babies, children, to put them into sleep, so that when they're crying, you can tame them up to stop them from crying. So lullabies are very helpful. Next, example of a lullaby is Matulog ka na bunso. And English translation, sleep now, youngest one. Ang ina mo ay malayo, your mother is far away, at hindi ka masundo. She can't come home for you. May putik, may balaho, there's mad, there's a swamp. So that is an exact example of a lullaby. Next, example of folk song is Tulang Pambata. Children's songs may be sung and danced too. Other terms for Tulang Pambata in Maguindanao, we call this as Ida-Ida Arata. In Imbanag dialect, Canciones para Abing. And in Tausog dialect, we call it Ilangan Bata-Bata. So, we are all familiar with different types of children poetry. And Tulang Pambata are very effective and helpful. That this will serve as your learning material as they grow up, so they could be able to understand at their early age what is the characteristic basic description of a young Filipino woman and a young Filipino man in the society. And it could also help them to be able to acquire skills in reading. At least, Tulang Pambata are also one of the classification of a very informative literary work. Next is love lyrics. Love lyrics. So, in Ilonggo, it is also termed as Panawagan and Balitaw. These are actually sad lyrics about unrequited love. In Ivatan, it's Lapi, and it celebrates the lover's power to demolish. So, these are usually courtship songs, actually. And examples of this are Aliri for Aita language, Jona for Tagalog, Harana for Cebuano, and Bayok for Maranao. So, a typical example of this are the songs that our lolos would sing to our lolas way back before, during the time that they want to serenade or harana our grannies or the people before. Traditional type of courtship, actually. And next is work songs. So, of course, if there are love songs, there are also work songs. Depict the livelihood of the people often sung to go with the movement of workers, such as we have Kalusan in Ivatan language. This is being sung when fishermen are rowing at sea or clearing a farm for the part of the farmers. So, Lirianin, Tagalog, this is a rowing song. Mambayo, a Kalinga song. It is being sung by the native Kalingayons or Igorots from the time that they are rice pounding a song. Pag gusto po nilang mag-harvest ng kanilang mga palay or sa panahon ng pagtatanim para magbigay ng maraming maganda ang maging outcome ng kanilang pagtatanim at marami silang maani. So these are actually sung by our fellow Igorots and Kalingayons, Mambayo, for their God, so that God or Batala would help them in giving them a good harvest. Next, in Manobo dialect, we have Mga Ninay. This is actually a bee hunting song. So, there are actually maybe some Filipino natives who hunt bees, maybe as they're living, or maybe they're using honey for their own personal usage or for personal purposes in their local homes. So, they're singing this Mga Ninay. So for also the good production and good hunting of honey and bees. Okay. While in Ilocano, we have Manamili. Manamili is being sung by our kapwa Ilocano while they're making pots, clay pots. Next, if we have work songs, of course we have drinking songs. These are actually songs that are being sung during carousels. Other terms used for Bicolano, it's tigsik and Cebuano or waray tagay. So, drinking songs, these are songs that are being sung by some of our maybe Filipinos, fellow Filipinos who are very fond of drinking. Traditional way of drinking, kumakanta sila sa mga naglalasing po. Next, religious songs. Okay, so for Thanksgiving, we call it aba-amba. For exorcism chant is that we want to anoint the sick, we want to exorcism when there's a bad spirit inside the body of a person, then they exercise this exorcism chant called bugyaw. Okay, so we also have dagunan for good harvest, and harito if our Filipino natives before are praying for blessings. Next, we have also death songs. So in Ilocano, we call it dungaw, Cebuano, Kanogon, and in Bontoc tribes, we call it anako. So death song is actually called in English term as elegy. Next, we are done with the Filipino songs, Filipino speeches. Now let's move into the last type of literature, which is folk narratives. These are stories of native Filipinos. These deal with the power of nature, personified their submission to a deity, usually Bathala, and how this deity is responsible for the blessings and calamities. These also tackle about irresponsibility, lust, stupidity, deception, and fallibility, which eventually leads to the instilling of good morals. So folk narratives, it actually tells the daily stories or the daily life stories of the Filipino natives before. It also shows some of the cultural practices of the Filipino natives before, their belief system on how they pray for Bathala, on how they believe on the gods and goddesses, different deities before. As a matter of fact, our Filipino natives before believed in Bathala, but aside from Bathala as the highest or the supreme god, they also believe in different deities like ang Diyos o Diyosa ng ilog, Diyosa ng palayan, Diyosa ng araw. So, counterpart of, just like for example, Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, they pray for these deities that these deities would pity them and bless them with many fruitful harvests in life and to also save them from different calamities. And from these folk narratives, this becomes also the framework or foundation of establishing good moral practices. Example of this is folktale. Folktale is a characteristically anonymous, timeless, and placeless tale circulated orally among people. So folktale, example of this is the story of Juan Gobler's Guavas, or in Tagalog term, the story of Juan Tamad. This is actually a story, folktale, a folklore that is being passed down from generation to generation. Actually, even up to now, young generation in this modern period still recognize who Juan Tamad is. And they also, as a matter of fact, Filipino parents would say or would always advise to their young children that they should not imitate characteristic of Juan Tamad, who is a lazy person. Next is fable, or in Tagalog we call it fabula. This is actually a story which the main characters are animals. So here, animals would behave or would acquire the abilities and the feelings of human beings. Just like, for example, the monkey and the crocodile, ang kuneo at ang matching, or the stories of ang tatlong baboy, three little pigs. We, as a matter of fact, we all know that animals could not be able to talk. They could not be able to feel anger, sadness. They could not be surprised. They could not be able to do actions just like human beings. But what makes fable a very unique type of literature, because they let these animals or different inanimate objects be personified with the abilities of human beings. Next is legend. This is presented as history but is unlikely to be true. So legends, they say that legends may be true, but some would say maybe it's just oral tales that is being passed by generation to generation, and until now it remains to become a legend, because until now it is not yet proven to really been existed before. Just like, for example, of legends is si Maria Makiling in Laguna, or the legend of Bernardo Carpio, or the legend of on how Pangasinan started, ang legend ni Eva at Adan. So those are examples of Filipino legends. Example also is the flood story. It is actually a legend of Bukidnon, but there's also another version from Igorot. Okay, so legend. Next is myth or mythology. This is told to explain a belief, practice, or a natural phenomenon. So mythologies, so part of it may be is true, because we all know that the writers before are our ancestors, and they are just merely basing what they are writing from their own experiences, from their belief or cultural system, from their own experiences in life. So examples of mythology is the creation, which has two versions, Igorot and Tagalog version. Next is epic or epico. This narrative poem celebrates the adventures and achievements of a hero. So here in epic, there's always a hero who saves humanity, or who saves the life of many Filipinos over the bad, from the bad, against the bad people or the bad antagonists. So this epic is usually a long story. It comes to a very long pages story. So examples of this epic are Biyag ni Lamang, Hinilawod, and Darangan. These are actually examples of Mindanaoan epics or epico. So here in epic, the concept that you just need to remember to determine if the story is epic, if there is always a hero. Counterpart of this in Greek mythology is the journey or the labors of Hercules. Okay. Example 1 of folk narrative is Biyag ni Lamang. Biyag ni Lamang is actually an Ilocano epic tale which tells the adventures of Lamang, a man with supernatural powers. He goes to war at 9 months old and seeks the killers of his father. He embarks on a quest with his animal friends and meets his future wife, Ines Kanoyan. He is swallowed by a fish and resurrected from death by his animal friends. So this is actually a very interesting, a very vivid and imaginative type of story. So, Biyag ni Lamang, as what I've said, there's always a hero, a man, usually in the form of man, who is very strong, who has that supernatural powers, who can save the humanity, or with a common or with an aim in life to achieve. Okay, so this is counterpart of Hercules in Greek and Roman mythology. Next, we have Hinilawod. Hinilawod is an epic of the Sulud, or group of people coming from the mountains of central Panay. It tells the story of three very strong men, namely Labaw Donggon, Umadapnon, and Dumalapdak. They are the sons of Datu Paubari, the ruler of Halawod, and the goddess Alunsina. The exploits of each son concerns beautiful women that he wants to have as a wife. Next is Darangan. This is actually a Maranao epic which depicts the adventures of a brave warrior named Bantugan. He owns a magic sword protected by his spirit. After a battle, he hit rest and accidentally falls into the water. A crocodile finds him and brings him to the enemy. He fights, regains his strength, and finally wins the war. Okay, so we are done with our lesson proper. So I hope that you really understood very well what is literature, what are the three categories of literature, which are the folk narrative, folk speeches, and folk songs. And I also hope that you already familiarize yourself with the various types of folk songs, folk narratives, and folk speeches, as well as their examples in each type of folk literary works or literary works, as I have said. So I also believe that at this point you already became interested in supporting our literature works and reading these works, because these are very wonderful creation of our ancestors way back from the time of 1500s, from the time that we're not yet being colonized, up to the time of colonization, up to the post-colonial time, and up to this modern times. So as you can see that we Filipinos have really rich blended culture in our society, and that is something that we should be proud of and we should be thankful for. So let's keep on appreciating, guys, and supporting our local literary works. Okay, so for our activity or assessment, this is the instruction or direction. I will read to you. Note, this is an individual activity. Please write your answers in a short bond paper. Write your answers legibly. Okay, for the part 1, give 3 examples of the following folk speeches. So give me 3 examples, ABC, of riddles. Number 2, give at least 3 examples of proverbs. Number 3, write a tanaga using the rhyme scheme AABB rhyme and ABAB rhyme. So please refer to the examples that are being mentioned a while ago in the previous discussion. So in tanaga, what I'm expecting to see is only, of course, 4 stanzas. No more, no less. Okay, continuation of our assessment. Part 2, give 3 examples of the following folk songs and state their origin and description. Okay, so here, it is much more complicated than the first activity in part 1, because here, you need to enumerate examples of folk songs, like for example, lullaby, tulang pambata, love lyrics, religious songs, and death songs. But aside from enumerating them, you need also to at least define or write the origin and description of each examples of the folk songs. So I hope you understood it very well. Okay, and continuation, part 3. Read the folk tale entitled One Daughter's Guava and fill in the following elements of a literary story presented in the selection. So you need to fill in the elements. You know, of course, before you will be able to determine the elements, you need first to read and understand the story, so you could be able to fill it up or properly and correctly. Okay, so you need to determine who is the character in the story, setting where the story actually takes place, the plot, maybe just a short summary will do. What is the theme of the story or the universal or main idea of the story? Symbolism being used in the story. what is the genre of the story? When you say genre, is it drama, comedy, tragicomedy? Is it farce? Is it romance? Or is it horror, suspense, or thriller? So, by merely understanding the story, you should be able to answer it also. And of course, don't forget to write your learning for the last item, the moral lesson of the story. So, for the story selection of One Gathers Guava, I have already inserted a copy here in this last slide. All you need to do is to understand the selection. Okay, so that's it. So I think it will just be better for me to reveal the answers from the very first activity, the pre-assessment, the word hunt puzzle, up to this second part of activity, which is the assessment. At the end, or maybe after the time that you have already answered the questions, because you know the procedure already, guys, right? I'll be giving to you the module, and then I'll be giving you at least a time frame to answer that, and I will just be correcting your papers once at a time because of the new normal classes. Okay, so I hope, guys, that you really understood our lesson, and I hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much. I'm your teacher, Bridget. Thank you.